The winter of 1873 had settled over the dusty town of Silver Creek like a heavy blanket, turning the usual amber dirt roads into frozen ruts that caught wagon wheels and twisted ankles. The Gilded Rose Saloon stood at the heart of Main Street, its weathered wooden facade bearing the scars of countless storms and the occasional gunfight. Paint peeled from its sign like old skin, but inside, the warmth of bodies and whiskey created a different world entirely. Eliza May Hartley moved through the crowded saloon with practiced grace, balancing a tray of drinks while dodging the grabbing hands of drunken minors. At 23, she had already lived more lives than most women twice her age. Her auburn hair, pinned up in a style that suggested respectability despite her occupation, caught the lamplight as she wove between tables. The emerald dress she wore, required uniform for all the saloon girls, had seen better days, but she wore it with a dignity that made men look twice, though not always with pure intentions. "Another round for the boys at table 3. Eliza," Big Tom, the bartender, called out over the din of laughter and clinking glasses. His massive frame dominated the space behind the bar, and his presence alone prevented most trouble before it started. "Coming right up," Eliza replied, her voice carrying the faint traces of an Eastern accent she'd never quite shaken. Boston seemed a lifetime away now, that proper life of tea parties and piano recitals buried beneath years of running west, always west, until there was nowhere left to run. The saloon was particularly rowdy that December evening. The Patterson mine had struck a new vein of silver, and the miners were spending their advance wages with abandon. The piano player, an elderly man everyone called Professor, though no one knew if he'd ever taught a day in his life, pounded out popular tunes while a few of the other girls danced with customers for tips. Eliza had learned early on to avoid the dancing. It led to expectations, and expectations led to trouble. She served drinks, smiled when required, and kept her distance. Most of the regulars had learned to respect her boundaries, but there were always newcomers who needed educating. As she approached table 3 with the fresh drinks, she noticed a stranger sitting alone in the corner, his back to the wall, a gunfighter's position. He wasn't drinking, just watching, his dark eyes scanning the room with the alertness of a hawk. Everything about him spoke of danger, from the well-oiled holster at his hip to the weather-beaten duster that had seen too many miles. His face was angular, hardened by sun and wind, with a day's worth of stubble shadowing his jaw. She guessed him to be perhaps 30, though life in the territories aged a man fast. Their eyes met across the smoky room, and something passed between them, not the usual leer she encountered, but something deeper, almost like recognition. She quickly looked away, unsettled by the intensity of his gaze. "Well, well, if it ain't the prettiest bird in this whole establishment," slurred Jake Morrison, one of the Patterson miners. As Eliza set down his whiskey, his friends laughed, encouraging him. "Why don't you sit a spell, darlin'? I got plenty of silver to keep you company." "I'm working, Mr. Morrison," Eliza said evenly, having perfected the art of polite deflection. "Perhaps one of the other girls—" "I don't want the other girls." His meaty hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "I want you." Before Big Tom could intervene, before Eliza could even pull away, a shadow fell across the table. The stranger had moved with impossible silence, and now stood beside them, his presence commanding immediate attention. "The lady said she's working," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like distant thunder. "I believe that means you should let go." Jake's face flushed red, either from whiskey or anger. "This ain't none of your business, stranger. Best you move along. I'm making it my business." The stranger's hand rested casually on his gun belt, the gesture subtle but unmistakable. "Release her. Now." The saloon had grown quiet, that particular hush that preceded violence. Eliza felt her heart racing, not from fear but from something else. The way this unknown man had stepped in without hesitation, without expectation of reward. Jake's companions were eyeing the stranger's gun, calculating odds. They must have decided against them because one tugged on Jake's sleeve. "Come on, Jake. Ain't worth the trouble." Reluctantly, Jake released Eliza's wrist, leaving red marks on her pale skin. "This ain't over," he muttered, but he was already backing down. The stranger waited until the miners had turned their attention back to their drinks before speaking to Eliza. "You all right, ma'am?" "I'm fine," she said, rubbing her wrist. "Thank you, Mr. Jason Wade." He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture from a more civilized time. "And you are?" "Eliza." She didn't offer her last name. Saloon girls rarely did. I should get back to work." "Of course." But his eyes held hers for a moment longer, and in them she saw something unexpected, loneliness that matched her own. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Eliza went through the motions of serving drinks and deflecting advances, but her awareness kept drifting to the corner where Jason Wade sat nursing a single whiskey. He rebuffed attempts at conversation from others, his attention seemingly focused on nothing. Yet she felt his gaze following her movements. As midnight approached and the crowd began to thin, she found herself unnecessarily wiping down tables near his corner. "You didn't have to do that earlier," she said quietly. "I can handle myself." "I'm sure you can," Jason replied, "but that don't mean you should have to." The simple kindness in his words nearly undid her. When was the last time someone had shown her consideration without wanting something in return? "You're not from around here," she observed. "Just passing through." He took a slow sip of his whiskey, though winter in these parts has a way of changing a man's plans. "Where you headed?" "Wherever the wind takes me, I suppose. Been drifting since—" He stopped abruptly, his jaw tightening. "Been drifting a while." Eliza recognized the look of someone running from ghosts. She saw it every morning in her own mirror. "The Gilded Rose has rooms upstairs," she found herself saying, "if you need a place to stay. Nothing fancy, but it's warm and mostly clean." A smile ghosted across his features, transforming his harsh face for just a moment. "Appreciate the recommendation, Miss Eliza." Before she could respond, Big Tom's voice boomed across the saloon. "Closing time! You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here." The remaining patrons grumbled, but began filing out into the cold night. Eliza busied herself with collecting empty glasses, aware that Jason Wade hadn't moved from his table. "Eliza," Big Tom called, "you can head on home. I'll finish up here." She nodded gratefully, fetching her worn shawl from behind the bar. As she wrapped it around her shoulders, she noticed Jason finally rising from his seat. He moved with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to violence, but not ruled by it. At the door, their paths crossed again. "Walk you home," he offered. "Streets aren't always safe this time of night." She should have refused. A saloon girl accepting an escort meant something specific in towns like Silver Creek. But something in his manner, respectful, protective without being possessive, made her nod. They stepped out into the brittle December night, their breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The town was quiet now, most windows dark except for the occasional flicker of candlelight. "You don't act like the other girls in there," Jason observed as they walked. "I'm not like the other girls." The words came out sharper than intended. "Sorry, this isn't what I planned to be doing with my life. Plans have a way of not working out," he said quietly. "Sometimes we end up in places we never imagined, doing things we never thought we could." They walked in comfortable silence down the frozen street, past the general store and the blacksmith's shop, past the church that Eliza had never felt worthy to enter. Her small cabin sat at the edge of town, barely more than a shack, but her own space nonetheless. "This is me," she said, stopping at the crooked gate. Jason looked at the modest dwelling, then back at her. "Thank you for the walk, Miss Eliza, and the conversation. Thank you for earlier." She pulled her shawl tighter. Not many men would have risked trouble for a saloon girl's honor. "You're not just a saloon girl," he said firmly. "Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." As he turned to leave, Eliza found herself calling out, "Jason?" He paused, looking back. "That room at the Gilded Rose, it really is available, if you're staying in town a while." even in the darkness. She could see his smile. "Might just take you up on that, ma'am. Good night." She watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the shadows between buildings. For the first time in years, Eliza felt something stir in her chest that she'd thought long dead. Hope, perhaps, or at least the possibility of it. Inside her cold cabin, she lit a lamp and stoked the dying embers in the small stove. As warmth slowly filled the room, she sat on her narrow bed and unlaced her boots, thinking about dark eyes that had seen too much and still managed to show kindness. Through her frosted window, she could see fresh snow beginning to fall, covering the ugly scars of the mining town in pristine white. Change was coming to Silver Creek. She could feel it in the winter wind, and, for once, Eliza May Hartley wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The stranger named Jason Wade had walked into her life like a ghost from the wilderness, and somehow, in the space of one evening, had reminded her that she was more than the role circumstances had forced her to play. As sleep finally claimed her, she found herself whispering his name into the darkness, testing how it felt on her lips, unaware that miles away in a rented room, he was doing the same with hers. The following evening arrived with a bitter wind that rattled the windows of the Gilded Rose. Eliza had spent the day wrestling with unfamiliar emotions, her thoughts continually drifting to the mysterious Jason Wade. She'd half expected him to be gone, another drifter passing through like tumbleweeds across the desert. But when she entered the saloon for her shift, there he was, seated at the same corner table, his presence both comforting and unsettling. The night progressed much like any other, except for Jake Morrison and his crew, who seemed determined to make trouble. They'd been drinking heavily since afternoon, their voices growing louder and cruder with each round. Eliza did her best to avoid their table, letting the other girls handle their orders. But Jake's eyes followed her with predatory intensity. "Hey there, Boston girl," Jake called out, using the nickname some of the meaner customers had given her. "Still too good to drink with honest working men?" Eliza continued clearing a nearby table, pretending not to hear. But Jake wasn't one to be ignored. He stumbled to his feet, weaving his way toward her. "I'm talking to you," he growled, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Think you're better than us 'cause some drifter stood up for you? He ain't here to protect you now. Please leave me be, Mr. Morrison," Eliza said quietly, trying to step around him. He blocked her path, his bulk towering over her. "Maybe you need someone to teach you some manners. Show you proper respect for the men who keep this town running." His hand reached for her, and Eliza instinctively stepped back, her tray of empty glasses crashing to the floor. The sound silenced the saloon for a moment before Jake's harsh laughter filled the space. "Clumsy little thing, ain't you? Get on your knees and clean that up. While you're down there, that's enough." Jason's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stood a few feet away, his stance deceptively relaxed, but Eliza could see the coiled readiness in every line of his body. Jake's face flushed darker. "You again. I told you this ain't your business, stranger. And I told you to leave the lady alone." Jason's hand rested on his holster. "Seems we have a failure of communication." "Boys," Big Tom warned from behind the bar, his shotgun now visible on the counter. "Take it outside if you must, but there'll be no bloodshed in my establishment." Jake's companions were pulling at him now, whispers of, "He's fast, Jake," and "not worth dying over" reaching Eliza's ears. But Jake's pride in liquor made him foolish. "Outside, then," he snarled at Jason. "Let's settle this proper." Jason nodded once, his expression grave. "After you." The saloon emptied into the street, patrons eager to witness the confrontation. Eliza found herself pushed along with the crowd, her heart hammering against her ribs. Street duels were common enough in Silver Creek, but something about this one felt different, personal. The two men faced each other in the moonlit street, snow beginning to fall in lazy spirals. Jake's hand shook slightly as it hovered near his gun. Jason stood perfectly still, a statue carved from shadow and purpose. "This is stupid. Jake," one of his friends called out. "Just apologize and let it go." But Jake was beyond reason. His hand dropped toward his weapon, a clumsy, telegraphed movement. Jason's draw was so fast Eliza barely saw it. One moment, his hand was empty. The next, his Colt was out and speaking. The shot echoed off the buildings, and Jake's gun flew from his hand before he could clear leather. He stumbled backward, clutching his bleeding hand, his weapon spinning in the dirt. Jason holstered his gun with the same fluid speed. "Next time I won't be so charitable. Stay away from Miss Eliza." The crowd began to disperse, the excitement over. Jake's friends hustled him toward the doctor's office, his curses fading into the night. Eliza stood frozen in the saloon doorway until Jason approached. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to bring violence to your workplace." "You didn't bring it," she replied, finding her voice. "It was already there. You just redirected it." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of appreciation for her understanding. "Still, you shouldn't have to see such things. I've seen worse." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and she saw his eyes sharpen with interest. "Would you—" He paused, seeming to wrestle with himself. "Would you walk with me after your shift? I promise nothing improper, just conversation." She should refuse. She knew what people would think, what they would say. But looking into his earnest face, seeing the loneliness that echoed her own, she nodded. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. When Big Tom finally called closing time, Eliza wrapped herself in her shawl and stepped out to find Jason waiting by the hitching post. Without a word, they began walking. But instead of toward her cabin, he led her to the edge of town, where a small rise offered a view of the valley below. They sat on a fallen log. The lights of Silver Creek spread below them like earthbound stars. The silence between them was comfortable, not demanding to be filled. "You asked if I'd seen worse," Eliza finally said, her breath misting in the cold air. "I suppose you deserve to know what kind of person you're defending." "You don't owe me anything," Jason said softly. "Maybe not, but I want to tell someone. I've carried it alone for so long." She pulled her shawl tighter. "I wasn't always Eliza the saloon girl. Once I was Elizabeth Hartley of Boston, engaged to a respectable banker's son. My life was planned out, marriage, children, charity teas, all of it." Jason listened without interrupting, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. "But my fiancé, he had appetites, dark ones. When I refused to accommodate them before our wedding, he took what he wanted anyway." Her voice trembled but didn't break. "When I tried to tell people, no one believed me. Why would they? He was from a good family, and I was just hysterical. They said, pre-wedding nerves." "I'm sorry," Jason murmured, and she could hear genuine pain in his voice. "I couldn't stay, couldn't marry him, couldn't face the whispers and judgment. So I ran, took what money I had and headed west, thinking I could start fresh. But money runs out, and options for a woman alone are limited. The Gilded Rose was hiring, and Big Tom promised protection from the worst of it. So here I am." She expected judgment, disgust, perhaps pity. "Instead," Jason said quietly, "you're one of the bravest people I've ever met." Eliza turned to stare at him in surprise. To survive that, to keep going, to maintain your dignity and kindness despite everything, that takes a courage most men will never possess. He met her gaze steadily. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than you are." Tears she hadn't shed in years threatened to spill. "What about you? What ghosts chased Jason Wade?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, staring out at the valley, he began to speak. "I was a cavalry officer, Captain Wade. They called me, young and eager to serve my country." His voice carried the weight of old pain. "They sent us to deal with what they called Indian troubles. But when we got there, it wasn't warriors we found. It was a peaceful camp. Women, children, elderly." Eliza's hand found his, squeezing gently. "My commanding officer ordered us to attack anyway. Said orders were orders. I refused. Tried to stop it." His jaw tightened. "They court-martialed me for insubordination and cowardice. Didn't matter that I was trying to prevent a massacre. I lost everything, my commission, my honor, My purpose. Been drifting ever since, trying to atone for the lives I couldn't save." "You tried to do the right thing," Eliza said softly. "A lot of good it did those people." The bitterness in his voice was sharp as winter wind. "Sometimes I think I'm cursed to wander, never finding peace." They sat in silence, two damaged souls finding solace in shared pain. The snow fell harder now, beginning to dust their shoulders, but neither moved to leave. "Maybe," Eliza said slowly, "we're not meant to find peace alone. Maybe some burdens are too heavy for one person to carry." Jason turned to look at her fully, and in the moonlight, she could see the walls he'd built beginning to crack. "Eliza, I know," she interrupted gently. "I feel it too, this connection. It scares me." "It scares me too," he admitted. "I've been alone so long. I don't know if I remember how to be with someone. Then we'll figure it out together, if you're willing." Instead of answering with words, Jason lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. It was an old-fashioned gesture, courtly and respectful, and it made her heart race more than any passionate embrace. They talked until the cold became unbearable, sharing stories of their travels, their dreams before life changed them, small moments of joy they'd found even in darkness. When Jason finally walked her home, Eliza felt as though she'd known him for years rather than days. At her door, he hesitated. "Eliza, I need you to know, I'm not a good man. I've done things, been places. You deserve better than a broken-down gunfighter." She reached up, touching his cheek gently. "We're all broken in some way. Jason, the question is whether we let it define us or whether we find a way to heal." He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. "You make me want to believe that's possible." "Then believe," she whispered. When he left, Eliza went inside feeling lighter than she had in years. Outside her window, she watched him disappear into the swirling snow, but this time she knew he'd return. They'd found something in each other, not just attraction or loneliness seeking company, but genuine understanding. As she prepared for bed, Eliza caught sight of herself in the small mirror and was startled to see she was smiling. A real smile, not the practiced one she wore at the saloon. For the first time since fleeing Boston, she dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, the West held more than exile. Maybe it held redemption. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Jake Morrison wouldn't forget his humiliation easily, and the town gossips were probably already spinning tales about the saloon girl and the gunfighter. But tonight, warmed by the memory of Jason's gentle kiss on her hand and the promise in his eyes, Eliza allowed herself to dream of possibilities. The snow continued to fall, blanketing Silver Creek in temporary purity, hiding its scars and sins beneath pristine white. And in a small cabin at the edge of town, a woman whispered a man's name into the darkness, no longer as a stranger, but as hope itself. The morning sun cast long shadows across the frozen streets as Eliza made her way to the general store. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying every moment with Jason, every word they'd shared beneath the stars. The familiar weight of her basket felt different somehow, as if the whole world had shifted slightly on its axis. Well, look who's walking with her head in the clouds. Mary Sullivan, one of the other saloon girls, fell into step beside her. Unlike Eliza, Mary had chosen her profession willingly, fleeing an arranged marriage to a man 3 times her age. She was sharp-tongued but kind-hearted, the closest thing to a friend Eliza had in Silver Creek. "I don't know what you mean," Eliza said, but she could feel heat rising in her cheeks. "Oh, honey, the whole town's talking about your mysterious gunfighter. Jake Morrison's telling anyone who'll listen that the man's bewitched you." Mary's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Course, Jake's also nursing a bandaged hand and wounded pride, so maybe take his words with a grain of salt." Eliza sighed. "It's not like that. Jason is just Jason, is it?" Mary grinned. "First name basis already. My, you do work fast." "He's a gentleman," Eliza said firmly. "More than I can say for most men in this town." Mary's expression softened. "I know. Honey, I saw how he looked at you last night. Like you hung the moon and stars. Just be careful. Men like that, they carry darkness with them. Sometimes it swallows up everyone close to them. Before Eliza could respond, they reached the store. Mary waved goodbye, heading toward the boarding house where she lived. Inside, Mrs. Patterson, the store owner's wife, barely acknowledged Eliza's greeting. The cold shoulder didn't surprise her. Respectable women rarely had kind words for saloon girls. As she gathered her supplies, Eliza's mind wandered to Jason. Where was he now? What did he do during the daylight hours when the saloon was closed? The questions circled her thoughts like persistent flies. That evening, she entered the Gilded Rose to find the atmosphere notably subdued. Word of Jason's skill with a gun had spread, and the usual troublemakers were keeping their revelry in check. Jake Morrison was conspicuously absent, though his friends huddled at their usual table, shooting dark glances toward Jason's corner. Jason himself seemed different tonight. His usual watchful calm was tinged with something else. Anticipation, perhaps. When their eyes met across the room, he offered the slightest smile, and Eliza felt her heart skip. The night progressed quietly until around 10 o'clock, when the saloon doors swung open with unnecessary force. A woman entered. No, not just a woman, a lady. Everything about her screamed Eastern refinement, from her tailored traveling dress to her perfectly coiffed blonde hair. She was beautiful in that cold porcelain way that made other women feel clumsy and common. "I'm looking for someone," she announced, her cultured voice cutting through the saloon's noise. "A man named Jason Wade." Eliza's hand stilled on the glass she was polishing. Across the room, Jason had gone rigid, his face draining of color. "Catherine," he said, the name sounding like it had been torn from him. The woman, Catherine, smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, darling? Did you really think you could hide from me forever?" She glided across the room with practiced grace, every eye following her movement. When she reached Jason's table, she sat without invitation, arranging her skirts just so. 5 years, Jason, 5 years I've been searching for you. How did you find me?" His voice was flat, emotionless. "Oh, my dear, you know Daddy has connections everywhere. When word reached us about a gunfighter matching your description." She shrugged delicately. "Well, here I am." Eliza forced herself to keep working. Though her hands trembled, who was this woman? What claim did she have on Jason? "We have nothing to discuss. Catherine," Jason said coldly, "what we had is over. Has been since you chose your precious honor over me." Catherine's laugh was like breaking glass. "Water under the bridge. Darling, Daddy's arranged for your court-martial to be reviewed. Witnesses have come forward, saying they were pressured to testify against you. You could have your commission back, your good name restored. In exchange for what? Must everything be a transaction with you?" She reached across the table, her gloved fingers brushing his hand. Eliza saw him pull away as if burned. "Come back with me. Be my husband, as we planned. Daddy needs someone with your skills for his business ventures out west. Your father needs a hired gun with a respectable cover." Jason translated bluntly. "No, thank you." Catherine's perfect composure cracked slightly. "You always were too noble for your own good. But consider this. Without my father's influence, you'll remain a pariah. Is that really what you want? To spend your life drifting from one dusty town to another, getting older, slower, until someday some young gun decides to make a name for himself?" Eliza couldn't help herself. She drifted closer, refilling glasses at nearby tables to catch more of the conversation. "That's my choice to make," Jason said. "Is it?" Catherine's eyes swept the room and landed on Eliza with laser precision. Something cold and calculating flashed in her gaze. "Or have you found a reason to stay in this charming establishment? Really, Jason, a saloon girl? How far you've fallen. Watch your tongue," Jason warned, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Oh my." Catherine pressed a hand to her chest in mock surprise. "Have I touched a nerve? Don't tell me you actually care for this creature. Eliza's cheeks burned, but she kept her head high. She'd faced worse insults, though few had cut quite so deep. Jason stood abruptly. We're done here. Leave town. Catherine, there's nothing for you here. Sit down, Catherine commanded. And to Eliza's surprise, Jason slowly complied. You haven't asked about Samuel. The name hit Jason like a physical blow. His face went white, then red, his hands clenching into fists. What about him? He's alive. Jason, badly scarred from the ambush, but alive. He's been looking for you too. Wants to thank the man who tried to save his family. Catherine leaned back, satisfaction written across her features. Of course, he doesn't know where to find you, but I do. You're lying. Am I? She produced a photograph from her reticule, sliding it across the table. Taken 2 months ago in San Francisco. Eliza couldn't see the image, but she saw its effect on Jason. His shoulders sagged, years of guilt seeming to crash down on him at once. What do you want, Catherine? I told you, come back with me. Marry me. Let Daddy restore your reputation. In return, I'll arrange for you to meet Samuel. You can finally put those ghosts to rest. She stood, smoothing her skirts. I'm staying at the Grand Hotel. You have until tomorrow night to decide. She swept out as dramatically as she'd entered, leaving silence in her wake. Gradually, conversation resumed. But Jason remained frozen at his table, staring at the photograph. Eliza approached hesitantly. Jason? He looked up, and the raw pain in his eyes nearly broke her heart. I'm sorry you had to see that. Who is she? My former fiancé. We were engaged before everything went wrong. Her father was my commanding officer, the one who ordered the attack. His laugh was bitter. She chose to believe him over me, said I was a coward and a traitor, broke our engagement publicly, ensured everyone knew exactly what she thought of me. And now she wants you back? Her father's built a mining empire on blood and stolen land. He needs someone to do his dirty work, someone with military training who won't ask questions. In exchange, he'll clear my name, make it all go away. Jason rubbed his face tiredly. And Samuel, God, I thought they all died in the raid. If he's really alive. Eliza's heart sank. How could she compete with that? The chance for redemption, to reclaim his honor, to make peace with his past. What was a saloon girl's affection compared to all that? You should go, she heard herself say. If it means clearing your name. My name? Jason looked at her incredulously. You think I care about my name? I care about Samuel. Yes, that boy watched his parents die because I couldn't stop it. If he's alive, I owe him something. An explanation, at least. But marry Catherine? Become her father's enforcer? I'd rather stay a pariah. But, no, Eliza. He caught her hand, holding it gently. I've spent 5 years running from my past. Last night, with you, was the first time I've wanted to run towards something instead. The saloon suddenly felt too crowded, too noisy. Walk with me? Eliza asked impulsively. They slipped out the back, Eliza grabbing her shawl on the way. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant in the desert sky. They walked in silence until they reached the old cemetery at the town's edge, where weathered headstones told stories of lives cut short by disease, accidents, and violence. She's very beautiful, Eliza said finally. Like a diamond. Jason agreed. Hard, cold, and cutting. He turned to face her. When I was young and foolish, I thought that was what I wanted. Someone polished and perfect to advance my career, to look good at military balls. I never knew her. Not really. And she never knew me. She knows you now, knows what you want, what haunts you. No. Jason cupped her face gently. She knows my guilt, my regrets, but she doesn't know what makes me laugh, or that I prefer coffee to whiskey, or that I've read every book I could get my hands on during my travels. She doesn't know that I watch you sometimes and wonder how someone who's been through so much can still show such kindness to others. Eliza's breath caught. Jason, I need to find out about Samuel. He continued, if that boy is alive, I owe him the truth. But I won't marry Catherine, and I won't work for her father. Whatever happens, I want you to know that. When will you go? I don't know. Soon, probably. But Eliza... He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. I'll come back. If you'll have me. I'll always come back. The promise hung between them like a sacred thing. Eliza closed her eyes, memorizing the moment, his warmth against the cold night, the leather and sage scent of him, the way his hands trembled slightly where they held her. I'll be here, she whispered, for as long as you want me. They stayed there among the headstones, holding each other beneath the vast western sky, while the lights of Silver Creek twinkled below like fallen stars. Tomorrow would bring difficult choices and uncertain paths. But tonight, they had this, two wounded souls finding shelter in each other's arms, building something fragile and precious from the broken pieces of their pasts. When Jason finally walked her home, Eliza felt the weight of impending loss, but beneath it, something stronger. Hope. Not the naive hope of youth, but the hard-won hope of survivors who'd learned that sometimes, against all odds, broken things could be made whole again. At her door, Jason kissed her forehead gently. Whatever happens, remember, you're the strongest person I know. Don't let anyone, including me, make you forget that. As she watched him disappear into the darkness, Eliza touched the spot where his lips had been. Change was coming, swift and merciless as a desert storm. But she'd weathered storms before, and this time, she wouldn't be facing them alone. The days following Catherine's arrival passed in a haze of stolen moments and unspoken yearning. Jason had neither accepted nor rejected her ultimatum, and the deadline loomed like a gathering storm. The tension affected everyone in the saloon. Even the regular patrons could sense something momentous building. Eliza found herself treasuring each glance, each brief touch of hands as she served Jason his whiskey. They hadn't been alone since that night in the cemetery, but their connection had only deepened. She could read entire conversations in the way his jaw tightened when rowdy customers got too close to her, in how his eyes softened when they met hers across the crowded room. On the third night, Mary cornered Eliza in the back room where the girls kept their belongings. You need to fight for him, Mary said bluntly. I don't know what you mean. Eliza busied herself adjusting her hairpins. That Eastern princess has been parading around town, making sure everyone knows she's here to collect her man. Meanwhile, you're serving drinks like your heart isn't breaking. Mary grabbed Eliza's shoulders, forcing her to meet her eyes. That man is worth fighting for, and you know it. What would you have me do? I can't offer him his commission back. I can't clear his name or give him peace about the boy who survived. Eliza's voice cracked. I'm just a saloon girl with a shameful past. You're the woman who made him want to stop running, Mary said firmly. That's more than she ever did. That night, the saloon was busier than usual. Word had spread about the drama unfolding, and people came to gawk as much as drink. Eliza moved through her duties mechanically, her thoughts elsewhere. Jason sat at his usual table, but tonight he wasn't alone. A weathered older man had joined him, someone Eliza didn't recognize. Around midnight, Catherine made another appearance. This time she dressed more practically, though still expensively. She wore deep burgundy silk that made her skin glow like porcelain in the lamplight. Every man in the room watched her entrance, but she had eyes only for Jason. Have you decided? She asked, standing beside his table. Jason gestured to the older man. This is Thomas Garrett. He was at Sand Creek. He's agreed to testify about what really happened, with or without your father's influence. Catherine's perfect composure flickered. That's wonderful, darling, but it doesn't change anything. One witness against Daddy's influence? You'll need more than that. Then I'll find more. Men are tired of carrying the guilt of what happened that day. They're ready to speak the truth. This is about the saloon girl, isn't it? Catherine's voice rose slightly. You'd throw away everything for her? The saloon had gone quiet, everyone straining to hear. Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks, but forced herself to keep working. This isn't about anyone but me, Jason said evenly. I've been running from the truth for 5 years. It's time to face it, on my own terms." "Your terms?" Catherine laughed bitterly. "You always were too noble for your own good. Very well. If you won't come willingly, perhaps you need more motivation." She snapped her fingers, and 2 men entered the saloon, hard-faced individuals who wore their guns like old friends. They positioned themselves near the door, their intent clear. "Insurance," Catherine explained, "to make sure you make the right choice." Big Tom's hand moved toward his shotgun, but Jason shook his head slightly. The last thing anyone wanted was a shootout in the crowded saloon. "You've changed," Jason said quietly, studying Catherine's face. "The woman I knew would never have stooped to hired guns. The woman you knew was a fool who believed in honor and justice." Catherine's mask finally slipped, revealing raw pain beneath. "Do you know what it was like, being the daughter of the man who ordered that massacre? The whispers, the judgment. I lost everything too. Jason, my reputation, my friends, my future. The only way to survive was to become what they expected. Cold, calculating, ruthless." For the first time, Eliza felt a flicker of sympathy for the woman. They'd both been shaped by the choices of men, both forced into roles they'd never wanted. "I'm sorry for what you've endured," Jason said, "but that doesn't give you the right to perpetuate the cycle." "Rights?" Catherine's laugh was wild. "The only right that matters out here is might." She looked around the saloon with disgust. "But if this is what you choose, squalor and shame over redemption, so be it." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, I almost forgot. Samuel isn't in San Francisco anymore. He's here, in Silver Creek. Has been for 2 days. He's staying at the boarding house on Elm Street. I thought you should know." The words hit Jason like a physical blow. He half rose from his chair, then sank back, his face pale. Catherine smiled coldly. "My wedding gift to you, darling. The chance to face your past, just as you wanted. Though I wonder, will you have the courage to actually do it?" She swept out, her hired guns following like shadows. The saloon erupted in conversation, but Eliza only had eyes for Jason. He sat frozen, staring at nothing, the weight of 5 years crushing down on him. Without thinking, she abandoned her tray and went to him. "Jason?" He looked up, his eyes haunted. "He's here. The boy whose life I destroyed is here. You didn't destroy anything. You tried to save them, and failed." He stood abruptly. "I need air." Eliza watched him leave, her heart breaking. After a moment's hesitation, she followed. Ignoring Big Tom's call, she found Jason behind the saloon, leaning against the wall, his breath misting in the cold air. "Talk to me," she said softly. "What is there to say? That I'm a coward? That the thought of facing that boy terrifies me more than any gunfight?" He laughed bitterly. "Catherine's right. I don't have the courage." "Yes, you do." Eliza moved closer, her hand finding his. "The Jason Wade I know would never run from something this important. The Jason Wade you know is a fiction. I'm just a broken man pretending to be whole." "No." She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You're a man who's carried guilt that wasn't his to bear. You're someone who stands up for others even when it costs you everything. You're the only person who's ever looked at me and seen more than what I've become." Something shifted in his expression. "Eliza." "Go to him," she urged. "Face your past, and when you're done, come back to me. We'll face the future together." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You saw me," she whispered against his chest. "Really saw me. That's everything." They stood there in the shadows, clinging to each other while the world spun on around them. Finally, Jason pulled back enough to look at her face. "Come with me tomorrow, when I go to see Samuel." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. I want him to know that despite everything, I found something good. Someone good." Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. They stayed there until the cold became unbearable. Then Jason walked her home as he had each night since they'd met. At her door, He hesitated. Eliza, I need to tell you something. These feelings I have for you, they're not gentle or tame. They consume me. When I'm near you, I want... He struggled for words. I want everything. Your thoughts, your dreams, your past, your future. It frightens me how much I want. She understood. The attraction between them had been building like a wildfire, ready to consume everything in its path. Every look, every touch had been kindling added to the flames. I'm not afraid, she said softly. Not of you, not of this. I've lived in fear too long. With you, I want to be brave. He kissed her then, not on the forehead or hand, but fully on the mouth, pouring 5 years of loneliness and longing into the contact. Eliza responded with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss was desperate, passionate, a claiming and a promise all at once. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Tomorrow, Jason said roughly. After we see Samuel, we'll talk about the future. Tomorrow, she agreed. Inside her cabin, Eliza touched her lips, still feeling the burn of his kiss. Her body hummed with awakened desire, but more than that, her heart sang with possibility. Tomorrow would bring challenges, facing Samuel, deciding their path forward, dealing with whatever schemes Catherine might still have planned. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel the full force of her emotions. She loved Jason Wade, not the broken gunfighter or the fallen officer, but the man who'd shown her kindness without expectation, who'd defended her honor while respecting her strength, who looked at her like she was precious beyond measure. Through her window, she could see fresh snow beginning to fall. By morning, Silver Creek would be transformed again, its ugliness hidden beneath pristine white. But Eliza knew better than most that what lay beneath always remained. Waiting. The key was choosing whether to let it define you or whether to build something new on top of it. As she prepared for bed, her thoughts turned to the boy. Samuel, what would he be like? Would he blame Jason for surviving when his parents hadn't? Or would he understand that sometimes the greatest courage lay not in dying for a cause, but in living with the consequences of your choices? Tomorrow would bring answers. But tonight, Eliza held close the memory of Jason's kiss, the promise in his eyes, the feeling of being truly wanted for the first time in her life. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And somehow, that made all the difference. The morning dawned gray and bitter, matching the turmoil in Eliza's heart. She'd barely slept, her mind racing between anticipation and dread. Today, Jason would face his past, and she would stand beside him. But first, they had to survive whatever Catherine had planned. She dressed carefully in her most modest dress, a dark blue wool that Mary had helped her alter to be more respectable. Looking in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. Gone was the saloon girl in emerald silk. In her place stood a woman ready to fight for her future. Jason was waiting outside her cabin when she emerged, and the sight of him stole her breath. He'd trimmed his beard and wore his best clothes, but it was the vulnerability in his eyes that touched her most. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Face Samuel with me. It's my burden to bear. Your burdens are mine now, Eliza replied, taking his offered arm. That's what it means to care for someone. They walked through town as the sun climbed higher, casting weak light through the overcast sky. People stared openly, the gunfighter and the saloon girl, walking together in daylight like respectable folk. Eliza held her head high, drawing strength from Jason's presence. The boarding house on Elm Street was a modest 2-story building run by Widow Martinez, a stern woman who'd buried 2 husbands and had no patience for foolishness. She answered Jason's knock with suspicious eyes. We're here to see Samuel Littlefoot, Jason said, his voice steady despite the tension Eliza could feel in his arm. Room 4, upstairs, the widow replied, though I don't know why you'd want to disturb that poor boy. He's been through enough. They climbed the narrow stairs, each step feeling like a mile. At room 4, Jason hesitated, his hand raised to knock. I'm here, Eliza whispered. Whatever happens, you're not alone. He knocked. Come in, a young voice called. The room was small but clean. flooded with morning light. By the window sat a boy of perhaps 15, though his eyes held the weight of someone much older. The left side of his face bore terrible scars, and his left arm hung useless at his side, but his dark eyes were clear and intelligent as they fixed on Jason. "Captain Wade," Samuel said quietly, "I wondered when you'd come." Jason seemed to have lost the ability to speak. Eliza gently guided him to a chair, then took her own seat nearby. "You know who I am?" Jason finally managed. "I've always known. My aunt, who raised me after. She told me about the soldier who tried to stop it, who faced down his own men to protect us." Samuel's scarred face was calm. "I've been looking for you for 2 years. Why?" The word came out broken. "To thank you." Samuel leaned forward. "And to tell you something my mother said before she died. She said to find the soldier with kind eyes and tell him that his courage gave her comfort in her last moments. Knowing someone tried, it mattered." Jason buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. Eliza wanted to go to him, but sensed this was something he needed to experience fully. "I failed," Jason said roughly. "I should have done more, fought harder. You were one man against many." Samuel interrupted. "What more could you have done except die uselessly? My aunt says you were court-martialed for trying to save us. You lost everything. It wasn't enough. It was everything." Samuel's voice held wisdom beyond his years. "Do you know what happened after you were arrested? Some of the other soldiers, the ones who followed orders, they couldn't live with what they'd done. 3 took their own lives within a year. Others became drunks or worse. But you survived. You carried the guilt but didn't let it destroy you. How do you know all this?" "Catherine Thornton told me," Samuel said, and both Jason and Eliza stiffened. "She came to see me in San Francisco, trying to use me to manipulate you. She thought I'd be angry, that I'd want revenge. She didn't understand that my people don't think that way." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that I wanted to meet you, to thank you. She didn't like that." A ghost of a smile crossed his scarred features. "She brought me here anyway, thinking proximity would change my mind. It hasn't." Jason finally looked up, his eyes red but clearer than Eliza had ever seen them. "What will you do now?" "I'm going back to the reservation, to teach. My aunt's people need education if they're going to survive in this new world. I wanted to find you first, to give you my mother's message and my own gratitude." Samuel stood, extending his good hand. "You've carried guilt that was never yours. Captain, it's time to let it go." Jason rose and clasped the boy's hand, and something seemed to shift in the air, a weight lifting, a chain breaking. "Thank you," Jason said simply. Samuel's eyes moved to Eliza. "Is this your woman?" "Yes," Jason said without hesitation. "This is Eliza. She has kind eyes too." Samuel observed. "My mother would have liked her." They left soon after. Promises to write exchanged, a friendship forged from the ashes of tragedy. Outside, Jason stopped in the middle of the street, pulling Eliza into his arms. "It's over," he said wonderingly. 5 years of running, and it's over." "No," Eliza corrected gently. "It's beginning." They were interrupted by Mary running toward them, her face flushed with exertion and fear. "Thank God I found you. Catherine's at the saloon with those hired guns, and more besides. She's telling everyone you're both wanted back east. You for desertion, Jason, and Eliza for theft. Says she has warrants." Eliza's blood ran cold. "That's a lie. I never stole anything." "Doesn't matter if it's true," Mary said urgently. "She's got the sheriff convinced. He's gathering a posse. You need to run." Jason's hand went to his gun. "I'm done running." "You can't fight the whole town," Mary protested. "And killing lawmen, even corrupted ones, will only make things worse." "She's right," Eliza said, though it pained her. "We need to leave, at least until we can prove the warrants are false." Jason looked between the two women, then nodded grimly. "My horse is at the livery. We can—" "We," Eliza interrupted. "Jason, you don't have to—" "Where you go, I go," he said firmly. "That's what it means to care for someone. Remember, despite everything." Eliza felt a smile tug at her lips. All right, Mary, can you— I'll get your things from the cabin, Mary promised. There's an old mining shack about 10 miles north, up in the hills, abandoned but still solid. Hide there. I'll bring supplies when I can. They parted quickly. Jason and Eliza heading for the livery while Mary ran toward Eliza's cabin. The town was stirring now, word spreading like wildfire. Eliza could see men gathering outside the sheriff's office, checking weapons. At the livery, old Pete, the stable hand, looked up from mucking stalls. Trouble coming, he said simply. Saw that fancy woman talking to the sheriff, money-changing hands. We need my horse, Jason said. And another if you have one. Pete studied them for a moment, then nodded. Take the bay mare. She's nothing pretty, but she's got heart. Consider it payment for that time you stopped those boys from torching my stable. They saddled quickly, fingers fumbling with buckles as shouts grew closer. Just as they mounted, Jake Morrison appeared in the stable entrance, rifle in hand. Well, the whore and her protector, running off together. He raised the rifle. Guess I get to be a hero after all. Jason drew and fired in one motion, the bullet striking the rifle and sending it spinning from Jake's hands. Next one won't be so charitable, Jason warned. Jake scrambled backward, shouting for help. Jason and Eliza spurred their horses, bursting from the stable at a gallop. Behind them, the town erupted in chaos. They rode hard, the winter wind cutting through their clothes like knives. Eliza had never ridden astride before, but desperation made her a quick learner. She concentrated on staying in the saddle, following Jason's lead as he guided them off the main road and into the hills. Gunshots echoed behind them, but distance and poor aim kept the bullets from finding their mark. They climbed higher, the horses laboring through snowdrifts and over rocky terrain. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, Jason called a halt in a grove of pines. We've lost them for now, he said, dismounting to check the horses. But they'll pick up our trail soon enough. Eliza slid from the saddle, her legs nearly buckling. Every part of her ached, but she was alive and free. How far to the shack, Mary mentioned. Another hour, maybe 2. Jason pulled her against him. I'm sorry. This is my fault. Catherine's vendetta is born from her own pain and choices, Eliza finished. We both have pasts that won't stay buried. The question is what we do now. They remounted and continued their flight, pushing higher into the mountains. The shack, when they finally found it, was indeed abandoned but solid. A relic from the gold rush days when men believed fortune lay in every stream. Inside, they found a few pieces of rough furniture, a stone fireplace, and blessed shelter from the wind. Jason immediately set about securing the place, checking sight lines and escape routes with military precision. We can't stay here long, he said. A few days at most before they find us. Then we'll make the most of those days. Eliza replied, and figure out our next move. As afternoon faded to evening, they worked together to make the shack livable. Jason gathered firewood while Eliza cleaned years of dust and debris. When darkness fell, they had a small fire crackling in the hearth and had shared the meager supplies from Jason's saddlebags. Sitting before the fire, their first real moment of peace since morning. The reality of their situation settled over them. We're outlaws now, Eliza said quietly. Fugitives. Together, Jason added, taking her hand. Whatever comes, we face it together. The firelight danced across their faces as they drew closer, seeking comfort and warmth. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering their tracks and granting them temporary reprieve. But both knew this was only the beginning. Catherine wouldn't give up easily, and the false warrants would follow them wherever they went. Jason, Eliza began, but he silenced her with a kiss, gentle but insistent. Tomorrow, he murmured against her lips. Tonight, let's just be Jason and Eliza, not fugitives or broken souls, just 2 people who found each other against all odds. She nodded, understanding. They'd earned this moment of peace, carved it from chaos and pain, Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, in this humble shack high in the mountains, they had each other. As the fire burned low and the storm raged outside, they held tight to this fragile happiness, knowing it might be all they'd have for some time to come, but it was enough. They were together, and that made all the difference. The storm raged through the night, sealing them in their mountain refuge with walls of wind and snow. The old shack groaned under the assault but held firm, its builders having known their craft. Inside, by the dying firelight, two souls found solace in each other's presence. Eliza woke first, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then memory rushed back, the flight from town, Catherine's false accusations, the desperate ride into the mountains. But stronger than the fear was the warmth of Jason's arms around her, his steady breathing against her neck. They had fallen asleep by the fire, fully clothed but entwined, seeking comfort in simple closeness. Now, watching pale dawn light filter through the frost-covered window, Eliza allowed herself a moment of pure contentment. Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the likelihood they'd be running for the rest of their lives, she felt more at peace than she had in years. Jason stirred, his arms tightening instinctively before his eyes opened. "Morning," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. "The storm's passed," she said softly. "They'll be coming soon. Let them come." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "We'll be ready." They rose reluctantly, the spell of the night broken by harsh reality. Jason immediately went to check the horses while Eliza searched the shack more thoroughly. In a hidden cupboard, she found treasure, canned goods left by some previous occupant, a box of ammunition that miraculously fit Jason's rifle, and heavy wool blankets that would make cold nights bearable. Someone prepared this place as a hideout. She called to Jason when he returned. "Probably outlaws like us," he said with dark humor. "At least we're following in grand tradition." They broke their fast with canned peaches and the last of Jason's hardtack, planning their next move. The choices were limited: stay and fight, or run deeper into the wilderness. "There's a town called Perdition about 50 miles west," Jason said, sketching a rough map in the dust. "It's not exactly law-abiding. Catherine's warrants won't mean much there. A town full of outlaws and desperados?" Eliza tried to keep her voice light. "Sounds charming. It's not ideal, but it'll give us time to plan. Maybe find a way to prove the warrants are false. Or maybe just disappear entirely." Eliza said quietly. "Find somewhere new, where nobody knows us. Start fresh." Jason took her hand. "Is that what you want? To spend your life running?" "I want to spend my life with you," she said simply. "The rest is just details." Before he could respond, the sound of horses carried on the cold air. Jason moved swiftly to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. "3 riders, coming slow. They're following our trail from yesterday." He checked his guns with practiced efficiency. "Get behind the bed. If shooting starts..." "I'm not hiding while you fight our battles alone." Eliza picked up the rifle they'd found. "I told you, we're in this together." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the approaching hoofbeats left no time. They took positions by the windows, watching the riders approach. Eliza recognized Jake Morrison immediately, his arm still bandaged from their last encounter. The other 2 were strangers, hard-faced men who rode with the easy confidence of those comfortable with violence. "Wade," Jake's voice carried clearly through the cold air. "We know you're in there. Come out peaceful-like, and nobody needs to get hurt." "Including Miss Eliza?" Jason called back. "Somehow I doubt your intentions are honorable." "Morrison, the woman's a thief and worse." Jake spat. "But surrender now, and I'll see she gets to trial alive." Generous of you," Jason said dryly, "but we'll decline your kind offer." One of the other riders spoke up. "Mister, I got no quarrel with you personal-like. We're just here for the bounty. Make this easy on everyone." "The only thing I'll make easy is your trip to hell if you don't turn around now," Jason warned. Eliza saw Jake's face darken with rage. He yanked his rifle from its scabbard, firing wildly at the shack. The other men followed suit, and suddenly the air was full of splinters and gun smoke. Jason returned fire with deadly precision, forcing the attackers to seek cover behind rocks and trees. Eliza tried to aim the heavy rifle, but her hands shook too badly. The violence she'd fled in Boston seemed tame compared to this raw, primal struggle for survival. "Easy," Jason said during a lull in the shooting. "Breathe steady. Don't think about hitting them. Just make them keep their heads down." She nodded, forcing herself to calm. The next time one of the men exposed himself, she fired. The shot went wide, but the man ducked back quickly. Jason flashed her a proud smile that warmed her despite the circumstances. The firefight continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, suddenly, more hoofbeats. Lots of them. Eliza's heart sank. Reinforcements would spell their doom. But the shooting from outside stopped abruptly. Jake Morrison's voice, high with panic. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who doesn't appreciate bounty hunters in these parts." A new voice answered. Female, commanding, with a slight Mexican accent. "Drop your weapons, caballeros, or we'll drop you." Through the window, Eliza saw an astonishing sight. At least a dozen riders had surrounded Jake and his companions, all with guns drawn. At their head sat a woman perhaps 40 years old, dark-haired and fierce, wearing men's clothing with considerably more style than most men managed. "This ain't your business, lady," Jake protested. "We're here legal-like, with warrants." The woman laughed. "Legal? In these mountains? I think not. You have 10 seconds to ride away. 10, 9. Jake's companions didn't wait for 3. They spurred their horses and fled, leaving Jake to follow, cursing. The woman watched them go with satisfaction before turning to the shack. "Jason, wait. I know you're in there. I'm Rosa Delgado. My brother Rico sent word you might need help." Jason lowered his gun slowly. "Rico's your brother. He never mentioned that his sister runs a gang of bandits? I'm shocked." Rosa's smile was visible even from a distance. "Come out. We need to talk." Jason looked at Eliza, who shrugged. They had little choice. Together. They emerged from the shack, hands visible but near their weapons. Up close, Rosa Delgado was even more impressive. Scars marked her face and hands, testament to a hard life, but her eyes sparkled with intelligence and humor. "So," she said, studying them, "the famous Captain Wade and his lady. Rico wrote that you helped him out of a tight spot in Tucson last year." "It was nothing," Jason said. "It was his life, which makes it everything to me." Rosa dismounted gracefully. "When word came that Catherine Thornton was hunting you with false papers, I decided to return the favor." "You know about Catherine?" Eliza asked. "Oh, yes. She hired some of my former associates for her dirty work. They told me everything before I convinced them to seek employment elsewhere." Rosa's smile turned predatory. "That woman has no friends in these mountains." One of Rosa's men approached. "Riders coming from the south. Jeffa. Looks like a full posse." Rosa sighed. "No rest for the wicked. Come, you're under my protection now. We'll sort this out at my camp." "We don't want to bring trouble," Jason began. "Trouble finds me whether I invite it or not," Rosa interrupted. "Besides, I have my own scores to settle with the Thornton family. Her father's mining operations have displaced many of my people. Consider this mutual benefit." They mounted quickly, Eliza sharing Jason's horse to spare the tired mare. Rosa's gang surrounded them protectively as they rode deeper into the mountains, taking paths that seemed impossible until they were on them. "You're wondering why I help strangers," Rosa said, riding beside them. "It's simple. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and Catherine Thornton has made many enemies." "Including you?" Eliza asked. "Her father's mines poisoned the water in 3 villages. Children died. When the people protested, he had them driven off at gunpoint." Rosa's voice hardened. "Some debts demand payment." They rode for hours, climbing ever higher into mountains that seemed to touch the sky. Finally, as afternoon shadows grew long, they arrived at Rosa's camp, a hidden valley accessible only through a narrow canyon. Buildings clustered against the cliff walls, smoke rising from chimneys. It looked more like a small town than an outlaw hideout. "Welcome to Refugio," Rosa announced. "The last free place in these mountains." People emerged to greet them, men and women of all ages, many bearing the weathered look of those who'd chosen freedom over comfort. Children played between the buildings, and Eliza even spotted a schoolhouse. "This is incredible," she breathed. "We take care of our own here," Rosa said proudly. "Those the world rejects find welcome in Refugio." They were given a small cabin, clean and warm. As Eliza unpacked their few belongings, Jason spoke quietly with Rosa outside. When he returned, his expression was thoughtful. "She has a plan," he said, "to expose Catherine's lies and her father's crimes. But it's dangerous. More dangerous than being hunted for the rest of our lives?" Eliza sat beside him on the narrow bed. "Tell me." "There's a federal marshal in Denver, Judge William Prescott. He's investigating the Thornton mining empire for claim jumping and murder. Rosa has evidence but needs someone respectable to present it. Someone like a former cavalry officer." Eliza finished. "Even one who was court-martialed. It would mean leaving the mountains, facing danger. And if we fail, then we're no worse off than now." Eliza took his face in her hands. "Jason, we can't hide forever. If there's a chance to clear our names, to stop Catherine and her father from hurting more people, shouldn't we take it?" He covered her hands with his. "When did you become so brave?" "When I met a man who reminded me that surviving isn't the same as living," she said softly. He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, pouring all his fears and hopes into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Tomorrow Rosa will tell us the details," he said roughly. Tonight is ours." Eliza finished. Outside, the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire. In the hidden valley of Refugio, two fugitives found temporary shelter and something more, hope that their story might have a different ending than the one their enemies had written. As darkness fell and stars emerged like scattered diamonds, Eliza allowed herself to believe in possibilities. The road ahead was dangerous, but she wouldn't travel it alone. Whatever tomorrow brought, she and Jason would face it together, their love a light against the gathering dark. In the warm circle of his arms, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the strange turns that had brought them together. From a Boston drawing room to a Western saloon to an outlaw's refuge. It wasn't the journey she'd planned, but it had led her home. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it the weight of decisions that would shape their fate. Rosa Delgado had summoned them to her quarters, a surprisingly elegant adobe structure built into the cliff face, where maps and documents covered every surface. "The plan is simple in concept, dangerous in execution," Rosa began, spreading a map across the table. "Judge Prescott arrives in Denver in 2 weeks for the federal court session. We have evidence of Colonel Thornton's crimes, documents, witnesses, proof of the poisoned water and murdered settlers. But he's surrounded himself with powerful friends, including the territorial governor," Jason observed, studying the papers. "These show bribes, intimidation. How did you get all this?" Rosa's smile was sharp. "I have friends in unexpected places. Some of Thornton's own men grow sick of his methods. They talk, especially when properly motivated." "What about Catherine's false warrants against us?" Eliza asked. "Forgeries, easily disproven if we can reach the judge. But that's the challenge. Thornton's men control the approaches to Denver. They'll be watching for you." "So we need a distraction," Jason mused. "Precisely. My people will stage raids on Thornton's mines, draw his gunmen away. While they're distracted, you slip into Denver and present our case to Judge Prescott." Rosa leaned back. "If he agrees to hear the evidence, Thornton's empire crumbles. And if he doesn't?" Eliza voiced what they were all thinking. "Then you run and keep running, but at least you'll have tried." They spent the morning reviewing the evidence, memorizing routes and fallback plans. Rosa's intelligence network was impressive. She knew which roads were watched, which lawmen were honest, which could be bought. "There's one more thing," Rosa said as they prepared to leave. "I'm sending Miguel with you. He knows Denver, knows who to trust." Miguel turned out to be a young man barely out of his teens, with quick eyes and a quicker smile. Despite his youth, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd survived by his wits. "Don't let the baby face fool you," Rosa warned. "Miguel saved my life more than once." They left Refugio as the sun peaked overhead, a small party to avoid attention. Jason and Eliza rode together, Miguel scouting ahead, while two of Rosa's men brought up the rear with pack horses carrying supplies and the precious evidence. The first 2 days passed without incident. They traveled little-used trails, camping cold to avoid detection. On the third night, huddled together for warmth without a fire, Eliza felt the weight of their undertaking. "Are you afraid?" she asked Jason quietly. "Terrified," he admitted. "Not of dying, I've faced that before, but of failing you, of seeing Thornton win. You could never fail me." She pressed closer to him. "Whatever happens, these days with you have been worth everything." "Don't talk like that's past tense," he said firmly. "We're going to succeed, build a life together, a real life, not hiding in shadows." "Tell me about it," she whispered. "This life we'll have. A small ranch, maybe somewhere quiet where the past can't touch us. Horses, a garden, evenings on the porch watching sunsets." His voice grew warm with the dream. "Children, if you want them. Teaching them to ride, to read, to be brave like their mother." Eliza's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I want that, all of it. Then we'll have it, I swear to you. Eliza, we'll have it all." On the fourth day, trouble found them. Miguel came racing back from his scout position, face tight with worry. "Riders ahead, Thornton's men. Looks like they've set up a checkpoint at Widow's Pass." Jason cursed. Widow's Pass was the only way through this section of mountains without adding days to their journey. "How many?" he asked. 6 that I saw. Could be more hidden. We could go around." One of Rosa's men suggested. "No time," Jason decided. "Every day we delay gives Thornton more opportunity to strengthen his position. We go through. That's suicide." Miguel protested. "Not if we're smart about it." Jason's mind was already working, the tactical training taking over. "Miguel, you and Carlos take the evidence and go around. Use the old mining trail. It'll take you an extra day, but you'll avoid the checkpoint." "What about you?" Jason smiled grimly. "Eliza and I will give them something else to think about." "No," Eliza's voice was firm. "We're not splitting up." "Eliza?" "No, Jason, we stay together or not at all." She met his eyes steadily. "I won't lose you now." Miguel looked between them, then nodded. "There might be another way. The checkpoint is at the narrowest point of the pass, but there's an old Apache trail that goes up and over. It's dangerous. One mistake and you fall 100 feet, but it's possible." "Show me," Jason commanded. They studied Miguel's rough sketch. The trail was barely more than a goat path, winding up the cliff face and down the other side, one at a time, leading the horses. It might work. "We'll try it," Jason decided. "Better than a firefight we can't win." They reached the base of the trail as shadows lengthened. From below, it looked even worse than Miguel's description. A thin line scratched into the rock face, disappearing into gathering darkness. "I'll go first," Jason said. "Test each section. Eliza, you follow when I signal. The others come one at a time after." "Be careful," she whispered, touching his face. "Always am." He kissed her quickly, then began the ascent, watching him climb, leading his horse along that impossible path. Eliza's heart lodged in her throat. Every slip of loose stone, every moment when he disappeared around a bend, felt like an eternity. Finally, after what seemed like hours, she saw his signal, a flash of mirror in the dying light. Her turn. Eliza had never been afraid of heights, but this tested every ounce of courage she possessed. The path was barely wide enough for her feet, let alone a horse. She focused on each step, not looking down at the dizzying drop, trusting her mount to follow. Halfway up, disaster struck. Her horse, sensing her fear, balked. Its rear hooves slipped on loose shell, and for a terrifying moment, Eliza thought they would both plummet. Then strong hands grabbed the reins. Miguel, who'd climbed up behind her with cat-like quiet. "Easy, easy," he crooned to the horse. "Just a little farther. Bonita." Together they coaxed the frightened animal forward until they reached the relative safety of a wider ledge. Jason was there, pulling Eliza into his arms. "I thought I'd lost you," he said roughly. "Not that easy to get rid of." She managed, though her legs shook like jelly. One by one, the others made the crossing. As full darkness fell, they descended the far side of the pass, exhausted but alive. Below, they could see the checkpoint campfires where Thornton's men waited for prey that would never come. "That was insane," Carlos muttered when they finally reached level ground. "That was brilliant," Miguel corrected, grinning at Jason with newfound respect. They pushed on through the night, wanting distance from the checkpoint before dawn revealed their deception. By morning, they'd covered another 10 miles and found shelter in an abandoned prospector's cabin. 3 days to Denver, Jason said, consulting the map. "If we push hard, we can make it before Thornton realizes we've slipped his net." But Thornton was cleverer than they'd hoped. The next evening, as they approached the outskirts of Denver, Miguel returned from scouting with grim news. "The city's crawling with Thornton's men. They're not just watching the roads. They're in the hotels, the saloons, even stationed outside the federal building." "He knows," Eliza said quietly. "Somehow he knows we're coming." "He knew. Or he's taking no chances." Jason replied, "Either way, we need a new plan." They made camp in a grove outside the city, hidden but close enough to see Denver's lights. As they debated options, a new voice spoke from the darkness. "Perhaps I can help." Everyone reached for weapons, but the speaker stepped into the firelight with hands raised. He was an older man, well-dressed despite trail dust, with the bearing of someone used to authority. "Judge Prescott," he introduced himself. "And you must be Captain Wade." "How?" Jason began. "Rosa Delgado sent word I might expect you. When you didn't appear in town, I decided to look for myself." His eyes were shrewd but kind. "I've been investigating Colonel Thornton for months. If you have evidence of his crimes, I very much want to see it." "It could be a trap," Miguel warned in Spanish. "It could." The judge agreed in the same language, surprising them. "But I assure you, my interest in stopping Thornton is genuine. He's a cancer on this territory." Jason made his decision. "Show him, Miguel." They spread the documents by firelight, deeds, testimonies, records of bribes and murders. The judge examined each piece carefully, his face growing stonier with each revelation. "This is more than enough to destroy him," he said finally. "But we need to be smart about how we proceed. Thornton has many allies. If we move too quickly, evidence has a way of disappearing." "What do you suggest?" Jason asked. "Tomorrow, I convene a special session. Federal marshals I trust will secure the courthouse. You'll present your evidence formally, on the record. Once it's entered into official proceedings, Thornton can't make it vanish." He looked at Jason and Eliza. "I can also void those false warrants, but you'll need to testify publicly. It will be dangerous." "We've come too far to stop now," Eliza said firmly. The judge smiled. "Brave woman. Very well. Be at the courthouse at 10 tomorrow morning. Use the back entrance. I'll have men waiting to escort you safely inside." After he left, they sat in contemplative silence. Tomorrow would bring either vindication or disaster. "Whatever happens," Jason said, taking Eliza's hand, "I want you to know that you've given me something I never thought I'd have again. Hope, purpose, love. You've given me the same," she replied. "And tomorrow, we fight for our future, together." As the fire died to embers and Denver's lights twinkled like earthbound stars, they held each other close. The final gambit was set. In a few hours, they would walk into the courthouse and challenge one of the most powerful men in the territory. It should have felt like madness. Instead, wrapped in Jason's arms with their friends keeping watch, Eliza felt only determination. They'd been forged in fire, tested by trials that would have broken lesser souls. Tomorrow, they would prove that love and justice could triumph over greed and corruption. The mountain air was cold, but their hearts burned with purpose. Whatever dawn brought, they would meet it with heads high and hands linked, ready to claim the life they'd fought so hard to build. The Denver courthouse stood like a fortress in the morning light, its stone walls promising either sanctuary or doom. Eliza smoothed her dress, a respectable gray wool that Mary had somehow sent along with their supplies, and tried to calm her racing heart. Beside her, Jason checked his weapons one final time before reluctantly leaving them with Miguel. No guns in the courthouse. Judge Prescott had warned. We do this by law, not lead. The back entrance was guarded by 2 federal marshals, their badges gleaming and faces stern. They nodded at Jason's name and escorted the party through empty corridors that echoed with their footsteps. "Thornton's here," one marshal murmured. "Arrived an hour ago with a dozen lawyers and twice as many gunmen. They're making noise about false accusations and demanding to see the evidence." "Let them demand." Judge Prescott appeared from a side room, robed in black judicial authority. "This is my courtroom. Mr. Wade, Miss Hartley, are you ready?" They exchanged glances, drawing strength from each other. "We're ready," Jason said. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread through Denver like wildfire, the infamous Colonel Thornton facing federal charges. Curious citizens, newspaper reporters, and Thornton's hired thugs all jostled for position. At the defendant's table sat Thornton himself, a silver-haired man with the bearing of someone who'd never been denied anything. Catherine sat behind him, her perfect features marred by barely controlled fury. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Prescott took his seat, gavel ringing with authority. "This special session is convened to hear evidence regarding Colonel Marcus Thornton, accused of claim jumping, murder, poisoning of water supplies, and conspiracy to file false legal documents. Captain Jason Wade will present the evidence." "Objection!" Thornton's lead lawyer jumped up. "This man is a deserter and coward, drummed out of military service. He has no standing. Captain Wade's military record is not on trial here." Judge Prescott cut him off. "He is presenting evidence as a citizen. Proceed, Captain." Jason stood, and Eliza felt a surge of pride at his composure. Gone was the haunted drifter she'd first met. In his place stood a man reclaiming his honor. "Your Honor, we present documented evidence of systematic crimes committed by Colonel Thornton in his acquisition of mining claims throughout the territory." For the next hour, Jason methodically laid out the case. Documents proving forged deeds, testimonies from survivors of attacks on peaceful settlements, water samples showing deliberate poisoning of streams that fed non-Thornton mines. With each revelation, the crowd's murmur grew louder. "Lies," Thornton finally erupted. "Fabrications by outlaws and malcontents. Then perhaps you'd like to explain this." Jason produced a letter in Thornton's own hand, ordering the removal of a family whose land sat on a rich silver vein. "Your signature, Colonel. Your orders that resulted in the deaths of 8 people, including 3 children." The courtroom exploded. Through it all, Catherine stared at Eliza with naked hatred. When Judge Prescott called a recess to review documents, she cornered them in the hallway. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You've destroyed everything. My father, our family's reputation, our future. For what? So you could have your sordid little romance? Your father destroyed himself." Eliza replied calmly. "We just brought his crimes to light. And what about your crimes?" Catherine's smile was vicious. "Shall I tell them about Boston, Miss Hartley? About what really happened with your fiancé?" Eliza felt Jason tense beside her, but she placed a calming hand on his arm. "Tell them," she said simply. "I have nothing to hide anymore. I survived what was done to me, and I found my way to a better life. That's not shameful, it's strength." Catherine's perfect composure finally cracked completely. "You ruined everything." She lunged at Eliza, hands reaching like claws. Jason moved to intervene, but Eliza was faster. She caught Catherine's wrists, using the woman's momentum to spin her into the wall. Years of fending off grabbing hands in the saloon had taught her well. "It's over, Catherine," she said quietly. "Your father's empire, your schemes, your hold over Jason, all of it. Let it go and find your own path, like we did." Federal marshals arrived to separate them, and Catherine was led away, sobbing with rage. Jason looked at Eliza with wonder. "You continue to amaze me," he said. "I had a good teacher," she replied, squeezing his hand. Court reconvened, and the tide had clearly turned. More witnesses came forward, emboldened by Jason's testimony. Former employees of Thornton's operations, settlers who'd been driven off their land, even a few of his hired guns who decided switching sides was preferable to hanging. By late afternoon, Judge Prescott had heard enough. "Colonel Marcus Thornton, I find sufficient evidence to bind you over for federal trial on all charges. You will be held without bail." His gavel rang with finality. As marshals moved to arrest Thornton, chaos erupted. His remaining gunmen went for hidden weapons, but the federal officers were ready. The brief firefight left 2 of Thornton's men wounded, the rest surrendering when they saw the odds. Through it all, Eliza and Jason stood together, watching justice finally prevail. When order was restored, Judge Prescott summoned them to his chambers. "The warrants against you are hereby voided," he said, signing documents with a flourish. "Moreover, Captain Wade, I'm recommending to the War Department that your court-martial be reviewed in light of new evidence about your commanding officer's character." "Thank you, Your Honor," Jason said, voice thick with emotion. "Don't thank me. Thank your courage, both of you." The judge smiled. "I suspect you have plans." "A small ranch," Eliza said. "Somewhere quiet. I may know just the place. There's a property south of here, seized from one of Thornton's shell companies. Good land, water rights, even a house. Consider it compensation for your service to justice." They left the courthouse as free citizens, truly free for the first time since their flight from Silver Creek. Miguel waited outside with their horses and a grin that split his face. "Rosa sends her congratulations," he said, "and an invitation to visit whenever you like." "Tell her we're grateful for everything," Jason replied. "But right now, we just want to go home." "Home," Eliza repeated, savoring the word. They rode out of Denver as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. The ranch Judge Prescott had mentioned was 2 days' ride, but they were in no hurry. For the first time, they had all the time in the world. That night, camped under stars that seemed especially bright, Jason pulled Eliza into his arms. "We did it," he said wonderingly. "We actually did it." "Did you doubt?" she teased. "Every minute," he admitted. "But you never did. You gave me strength when mine failed." "We gave each other strength," she corrected. "That's what partners do." He kissed her then, deep and slow, a promise of all the nights to come. When they finally drew apart, both were breathless. "Marry me," Jason said suddenly. "I know we haven't known each other long, but—" "Yes," Eliza interrupted. "Yes, of course, yes." He laughed, spinning her around until she was dizzy. "The first church we find," he promised. "I want the whole world to know you're mine. And you're mine," she added firmly. They talked through the night, planning their future with the giddy excitement of young lovers. Though they were both old in experience, the ranch would have horses, perhaps some cattle, a garden where Eliza could grow the flowers she'd loved in Boston, children someday, who would know only love and freedom. As dawn broke over the mountains, Eliza stood and faced the rising sun. The girl who'd fled Boston in shame was gone. The saloon girl who'd hidden behind painted smiles had vanished too. In their place stood Eliza Hartley, soon to be Eliza Wade, a woman who'd faced her demons and won, who'd found love in the most unlikely place, who'd helped bring justice to the lawless frontier. She felt Jason's arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her head. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That every broken road led me to you," she said softly. "That all the pain was worth it for this moment, the first of many moments." He promised, A lifetime of them. Behind them, Miguel was loudly complaining about the early hour while packing up camp. Ahead stretched endless possibilities under the vast western sky. But here, in Jason's arms, as the sun painted the world new, Eliza was already home. She had left the saloon with tears and uncertainty. She had returned at dawn with hope whispering in her heart, and now, finally, she walked forward into the full light of day, barefoot on the warm earth, whispering not his name but their future, a prayer of gratitude made real. The girl who'd hidden behind propriety, the woman who'd survived behind painted smiles, had become something neither role had allowed. Herself, complete and unashamed. And beside her walked a man who'd traded his ghosts for dreams, his guilt for purpose, his loneliness for love. Together, they rode toward their new life, leaving behind the saloon, the shame and the sorrow. Ahead lay only the horizon, endless and bright with promise, waiting to be claimed by two souls who'd learned that sometimes the greatest courage is simply choosing to hope. In the distance, mountains stood eternal guard over the land, witnesses to all the stories of human triumph and tragedy played out in their shadows. But this story, of Jason and Eliza, of love found in unlikely places, of justice won against powerful odds, this story would echo in those peaks forever, a reminder that even in the wildest frontier, love could bloom like desert flowers after rain, beautiful and enduring against all odds. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this wild journey through the American frontier. I hope Jason and Eliza's story touched your heart as it did mine. Where are you listening to this tale? In your car during a long commute? At home on a quiet evening? Perhaps even somewhere in the modern American West, where the ghosts of these old stories still linger? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to know where in the world these words are reaching you. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more stories of love, adventure, and redemption from America's most legendary era. And please, share your thoughts about Jason and Eliza's journey. Did their love story move you? What was your favorite moment? Your comments help bring our community of Western romance lovers together. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own horizons.